Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a public hearing of the Committee of Public Safety regarding Bill number 210923. Before I begin this hearing, I'd like to recognize Samantha Williams, Esquire, who will read an important announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these hearings possible. Instructions for how the public can view and offer testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. Everyone who has been invited to this meeting to testify should be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Because this hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy, and by continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to Councilman Jones recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And would you please take the roll so that we can establish a quorum, and those members who are here will acknowledge that you are present and say a few words so that your image can be captured.
Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Green.
I think you're on mute, sir.
So on mute. I am here and present and did not want to be scolded by the chief clerk to this committee.
Good afternoon, Councilman Green. Councilmember Gautier.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues, Samantha, and to all of the witnesses for today. Present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Gim. Councilmember Brooks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm present.
Good afternoon.
Vice Chairman Johnson.
Present.
And Chairman Jones.
I am present, and that establishes a quorum for this committee. We are officially in order. Ms. Williams, would you please read the title of this bill for today?
Bill number 210923, amending Title 9 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Regulation of Businesses, Trades, and Professions by adding a new chapter, 5700, entitled Prohibition on Certain Gambling Machines and Skills Games to prohibit the operation of any casino-style or skill game that accepts cash payment for the chance of a cash reward and is not otherwise regulated by the state of Pennsylvania, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Before we start this hearing, I would like to offer a few insights. Number one, I am chair of public safety, but I'm also co-chair of criminal justice reform. I'm also a Pennsylvania Human Relations Commissioner. I want you to know that over the Thanksgiving holiday, I had a rare opportunity to watch a movie classic, and it was The Godfather. And in one of the scenes, there was a distressing dialogue, comment, exchange between the dons of all of the different families. And in that conversation, they were talking about drugs being introduced to their business model, in particular heroin. And they were struggling with whether or not they would do it. But one part that was relatively racist and discouraging was one of the dons said that if we do it, we will relegate it and keep it away from school kids, keep it out of children's hands, and we will sell it only in the colored people's neighborhood because they don't have souls anyway. Every time I watch that movie, I shudder to think how people thought about us then. But I fast forward to now, when I had the opportunity to go up and watch the city solicitors group argue before the Commonwealth Court a piece of legislation that we passed that deals with reporting guns that are lost or stolen. And one of the three judges said a comment that was kind of eerily similar. They said, well, Philadelphia has a whole bunch of problems, and maybe they should spend more time addressing those local problems that they have jurisdiction over versus coming up here tampering with the Second Amendment. Took me aback, but even in people's negative comments, there's a ring of truth often. And that ring of truth is that we should take advantage of the authorities that are given us within the city charter to govern ourselves, to safeguard ourselves. When I look at what is going on in our community by these GVTs, video game terminals, it reminds me of the fact that there is no governing entity at the state, and we do have an opportunity to take our destiny in our own hands. What I want to point out is that what is a nuisance business? Nuisance business isn't the bricks, the sheetrock, the electrical lighting that a building has. A nuisance business is the activities that happen within that structure. If you're selling liquor by the drink, if you are selling Lucy cigarettes, if you are selling drug paraphernalia, and if you have a secret word, a secret code, actual drugs, those are the things that impact negatively the quality of life in our neighborhoods. I say to you that I remember a time, and most of my colleagues here aren't old enough, when the numbers, the street numbers, were the thing that our grandparents and parents kind of relied on. And I remember my grandma playing her favorite numbers, and when it hit, oh Lord, it was a happy day. But city government and the federal government spent a great deal of time shutting that down. And the way they did it was to create a legal lottery, which superseded that. You could apply that to the after-hour speakeasies that they shut down as well. So when we look at the proliferation of these gambling one-armed bandits in poor neighborhoods throughout the city, where is Elliot Ness and the Untouchables when you need them? Let me take you back. In 2017, the whole idea of video terminals was discussed, debated, and legislated. And what it said was the argument went back and forth. The compromise was that you can have these machines at trucking terminals only. I'll repeat that, trucking terminals only. Since then, there have been approximately 50,000 of these machines placed out throughout Pennsylvania, some in legitimate places that make sense. But over 2,000 bandit machines, ungoverned by anybody, not the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the city of Philadelphia, have found their ways into corner stores in some of our poorest neighborhoods. In 2017, this body voted 17-0 not to include Philadelphia County as one of those places that you could put these machines in. 17-0. But somehow the back door was left open by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania because there is no overriding legislation. It is left to us to regulate. So over 2,000 of these machines, again, have found their way into our stores and are not legitimate, are not regulated, are not taxed by anyone. So left unto their own devices, this would be relatively harmless, but it isn't harmless. What happens is often they are on top of other issues within those corner stores that create the kind of mayhem that we have to deal with, where they sell Lucy cigarettes, where they sell liquor by the drink, and these things aren't behind the plexiglass where the legal lotteries are. They're right out in the open, in the lobby for people to utilize. What has become one of the methodologies of those people with criminal intent is they'll watch those machines, do other things while they're in there, and see someone hit. They'll say that that young man has a red tie and is wearing a vest and is about 6'3", and he hit for about $250. He's coming out the store now. And what happens next is an armed robbery. We have to regulate these things. We have the power to do so. So the argument is often, well, let our big brothers and sisters at the state introduce the legislation. And we've been waiting since 2017, over 5 years. Nothing has happened. There's been lawsuits. The state police view these things as inappropriate and illegal. When they tried to confiscate them, there was a lawsuit filed by the owners saying there is no legislation at the state or city level governing us. So you are inappropriate. You cannot overstep your bounds. And so they did. And so they stopped it. And so we are waiting for someone to rescue us. But I would suggest to you that we are who we are waiting for. So now, some people might say that this happened, almost organically. I would say it did not. I would say that there are particular neighborhoods that are targeted. That I would suggest to my colleagues that you're not going to find these machines in zip code 19106, which is the richest zip code in Philadelphia, which is Society Hill. But you will find it in 19131 in West Philly. You're not going to find these machines in 19143. Or you're not going to find them in Chestnut Hill or other places of wealth. But you will find them in North Philly, West Philly, South Philly, and beyond. This is not by chance. They figure we don't care and we don't govern our own abilities to do it. 19132, North Philly, overwhelmed with these machines. So with that, I want to say to my colleagues that you should be mad. You should be insulted that people did not stop by your office and say, Councilwoman, what do you think? Where should they go? And more importantly, where shouldn't they go? How do we avoid, Councilman, juveniles on their way to school deciding with their backpacks on to play at these machines? How do we regulate the payouts? How do you know that they don't remotely increase the amount of money that has to go in the machine before there ever is a payout? You don't know because none of us know. So we should be insulted in this committee. We should be insulted within our body, and every department that was bypassed on the way to drop these machines off should be angered as well. But I hope through this hearing and through subsequent discussions, because I'm going to meet with these people, that we ask the tough questions to get the proper answers to protect our people. We're going to see this through. My name's Kurt Jones, and you have my word on it. And with that, Ms. Williams, would any of the other members of this committee like to say a few words? Hearing none, going once. Hearing none, going twice. Samantha, would you please read the names of the first panel to testify?
Yes. The first panel will be Pete Wilson, Kirsten Britt, and Reverend Donna Jones.
Are you off mute, Pete?
Yes, I am. I just took myself off mute, and I just want to say thank you for having me, Chairman Jones. I want to give.
Can you say your name for the record?
PETER WILSON.
Thank
Peter
you.
Wilson. Special shout out to my councilwoman, Jamie Gaudier, and all of council. You all know me. I think you all know that my ward encompasses 48th Street to 40th Street, Market Street to Parkside Avenue. I've represented that ward close to 2 decades. And since I've been in that position, all I've tried to do is make things better for the community that I represent. I'm not going to go into all the things that I've accomplished, but I think that the seriousness of this discussion is really, it's not up there with gun violence because people aren't dying from gambling, but they're hurting their homes. They're hurting. I mean, listen, we all know that the 6th Ward is one of the poorest wards in the city. And as Councilman Jones mentions in his introduction about the Godfather and the powers to be using the Black community to drop all these negative things. We got all these stop and goes. Okay, we got drugs coming in and out of the community. You guys know the history of Los Angeles when they dropped all the crack cocaine and then it spread out throughout the country. So I was on the Avenue, 41st and Lancaster, about 3 weeks ago. And one of the brothers asked me, Pete, did you notice the gambling rooms that are not inside but outside? And they're accessible 24/7. So my thought immediately was, I got people that can't even pay their rent. They can't buy food. They can't send their kids to daycare. And they got access to machines that's only a dream. Just like the councilman was talking about his grandmother, his mother, playing numbers. And it's just a fixed situation where you don't make out. And you subtract from poverty that already exists. So I was just leveling about it. So I actually done about it because he was there. Councilman, you know Rodney, and he and I talked about it. And I talked to Representative Brown about it. So I'm here now to ask council to push this. This has to be regulated. And quite frankly, the folks that I've talked to in my ward, they don't want it. Now, I don't know the regulations that exist, the permits that are involved. I'm not familiar with the L&I issues that may be attached to these machines being placed into communities that are downtrodden. And like the councilman mentioned, Councilman Jones, you mentioned the stick-up guys. They're waiting for these people to be lucky enough after they pour all their hard-earned money into these machines to walk out and be robbed and possibly shot. So I'm begging you guys, push this, please. This needs to be regulated. I would like to see it removed. I don't understand why they just can't have the businesses, the retail businesses, the goods that they sell, to add that on. Like I said in the beginning, the stop and goes are enough. So with that said, please, you need me to there, and I get you back this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And Pete, when you live in certain zip codes, You see it up close and personal. And you see people do things out of desperation, wishing on a star. Um, and then it's just sometimes disheartening, along with some of the other issues in and around some of those stores that we really need to take a hard look at these days. And one of the things that we are going to ask to going forward is to do a thing called crime mapping, that to take a look at the geography of where these shootings go down. Remember, Gautier and I share borders along Market Street. And as my grandkids would say, sometimes at 60th Market, that's where it goes down. And, you know, you look at all of the elements that go into creating that environment. This is one of them. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Williams, who's next?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
just want to acknowledge that I'm present.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And
Thank you, Member Gomez. We will duly note.
yes.
Do you have
thank
anything to add at this point?
Yes, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you, the council sponsor, for this bill. And I wanted to thank all the guests who are here today to testify about this. If you know anything about me, you know, I have long believed that the exploitation and the profiting off of communities by entities, multinationals mostly, from the gambling industry has been nothing less than an attack on communities of color, on young people, college students, and others, on seniors who have given us, you know, sold us this idea that extraction of dollars out of communities and out of people's pockets is somehow supposed to be couched as economic development for the state. I've always thought that that was a gross misrepresentation of economic development, like emphasis on development, and of a modern society. A modern society doesn't count cash in coffers, regardless of where it comes from. A modern economy understands that when communities get poorer and somebody else's coffers get richer, something has gone horribly wrong. And so I really want to thank you for tackling this issue. I also want to emphasize that I think many of us on here worked really hard to say to the state, one, I oppose state-sponsored gambling, period. I think it's like an abomination of state responsibility, so I'll just put that out there. But that being said, there was supposed to be a limit to casinos. They were supposed to be isolated. They had to get the request they had to be cited. They had to get clearance. They had to get licensed. They had to have all sorts of responsibilities that were placed upon them if you were going to authorize gambling in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, one of the things that many of us who fought that legislation through and through, whether it was in Chinatown, whether it was in South Philadelphia, whether it was in West Philadelphia, or all parts in between, was that we believed that this was a slippery slope, that opening the door to these sightings of casinos would potentially open the door to what we are hearing and the conversation that Mr. Wilson talked about today, which is now allowing it to permeate all manner of a neighborhood's life. And let's be clear, it will not be in just, you know, certain parts of the city. It's going to concentrate itself on vulnerable communities. There's no question about that. So this is a very serious conversation about the quality of our neighborhoods. It's a serious conversation about wealth and wealth preservation. It's a conversation about exploitation and extraction of dollars out of Black, Brown, and immigrant communities. Asian Americans have one of the highest gambling addiction rates amongst communities, and it's no question that it's one of the reasons why you will see strong advocates for controls, for responsible government intervention, and for what the initial vision was supposed to be, which was very limited casino gambling in the state of Pennsylvania. We are the poorest large city in the country. We are surrounded by 5 existing gambling casinos. Will now permeate throughout neighborhoods and communities should be something our city takes a strong stand on. It was the state's responsibility to legislate, to limit, and to regulate. They are not allowed to then spread it everywhere across the way. And, you know, as people continue to speak, I hope that you might also weigh in. This is very specifically on these games, and I understand that they can make their way through. But one of the other new means of expansion of gambling beyond, beyond the casinos, but was supposed to be specifically limited to casinos, is off-track sports betting. Those things are also moving their way through. They're moving their way through your neighborhood restaurant. You know, they could be moving their way through your neighborhood whatever hall. As long as you have a separate end and it's somewhat affiliated with the casino, they're allowing these things to move through. So I'll be interested in hearing, it's not related to this conversation that the council member has, but I'm interested in hearing whether some of the speakers believe that there's a consistent issue around off-track sports betting, as there would be with these types of machine games that are, potentially present in stop and goes and delis and your 7-Eleven and Wawa. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank again all the testifiers today.
Thank you. Samantha?
Next speaker is Kirsten Britt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. State your name for the record and please begin your testimony.
Okay, Kirsten, Kirsten, Britt, Britt. I first want to just say that I am in agreement with both sets of remarks from the chair and also Councilwoman Gim. And everything that I'll say moving forward, we can just add the betting to it as well, because for me, gambling is gambling. So today I would like to testify in favor of passing bill number 210923. As a member of the Cox Creek community, I am against anything that does not promote the health, wellness, and safety of our communities. These machines and any kind of betting, gambling are overwhelmingly placed in our communities. I just want to share something from an article that just came out October 15th of this year with the Gateway Foundation. It says Black people represent some of the most significant rates of gambling disorders. Studies show that Black people have over twice the rate of gambling addictions compared to white people. Black youth are also considerably more likely than white youth to engage in gambling activities, leading to problem gambling and addiction later in their lives. Overall, young Black males are associated with the highest rates of gambling disorders in the United States. Studies have shown that Black people with lower general health measures living in disadvantaged neighborhoods with the lowest income brackets are the most likely to be affected by gambling. Additionally, Black people with gambling disorders are more likely to develop higher rates of anxiety and personality disorders. They might even develop substance abuse. So when our communities are impacted like this, safety is an issue, whether it's on our business corridors or in our homes, causing discord and violence. Safety is a problem. Our communities do not need another reason to be further destroyed. As we battle to find ways to stop the murders in our city, we should see this as a part of the solution. Let it be on record that all murders aren't met with guns, nor do they happen instantly. If you know that by giving someone item A, something and that is misused or is combined with something like item B, it could cause their death or demise. And you know that they're prone to misusing it, or by no fault of their own, it probably will be combined. Would you still give it to them? And if so, and they died, would you not feel some responsibility? Just because you kill me slowly doesn't mean you're not killing me. Poverty, poor education, failing health, high crime, murders, high unemployment, food deserts, and gambling. Someone is definitely trying to kill me. Before you allow another casino-like machine, or as they mask themselves as games, that looks like, to allow it to infiltrate a community that looks like mine, please ask Whole Foods or Wegmans why they don't feel like a community like mine is worthy of a store like theirs. Because in their stores, you won't find bad food or casino-like machines.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and we appreciate it. Samantha, who's next?
Reverend Donna Jones.
Reverend Jones?
Good afternoon, Councilman
Good
Jones
afternoon.
and our servant council people who have brought this wonderful bill and necessary bill to us and to our community. I don't have a whole lot of statistics, and I don't have a whole lot of anything other than what I've seen as a pastor. And I also need to say, just like drinking, I don't have a problem if my people have a cup of wine or something like that with dinner. I do have issues with alcoholism. I do have issues with gambling addiction. I have seen it increase in my community and in my parish. I've seen it increase among our seniors. And sadly, I've seen it increase amongst our young people. I've also seen an increase in addiction to just gambling online in every capacity that leads to, if the same addiction is available down the street, it would be almost like every time we looked up, there was beer available, there was crack available. I would suggest and hope and know that we can find better ways of raising revenue than next door gambling. It would be it's difficult for us to regulate who gets a cigarette. So to do something like this will be detrimental to the health and safety of our city. It also demonstrates to our children a lack of creativity. There are a billion ways to raise revenue without raising it on the backs of the vulnerable and the desperate. We know what has happened in our community with the stores that do the quick loans, the payday loans. We know that has been devastating to our families because once you get one, you get more and more and more. We have families that get addicted and then they can't stop with crack. We see it with cocaine, and we see it a lot with people who have had trauma in their lives. These are triggers. So we can use our creativity to come up with safer ways over time. The one statistic I did look at was that these solutions are short-term cash solutions, just like payday loans. They're short-term cash solutions. But what ends up happening is they have long-term benefits. And if you talk to the good people at CBH that has a wonderful program for people with addictions, they started including gambling addiction, within the last 2 decades. So how would we have agencies of service to our community sponsored by our city working against something and that we're seeking to increase? So I support your work, your bill, and anything else we can do to keep our community safe and stop the exploitation of our people and the most vulnerable citizens of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Reverend. Let me just say for the record, let's separate the right and wrong of GBTs. Let's separate that. Whether you're for it, we don't receive a dime in revenue from those machines. Somebody off of the back of a truck dropped them off at the store, and that relationship is between the machine operator and the owner of the property. The state, the city, there's not a dime that goes in for public education, not a dime that goes in to our general fund to fix potholes, nothing. So all of that money at the end of the day goes back to Texas. Just want to put that on the record.
Thank you for this bill, and thank you for that clarification. So there's no reason to do it.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Williams, who do we have next?
Councilman Jones, there are no other witnesses present to testify.
Wow.
Can I be recognized?
Yes, you can.
I just want, I just wanted to, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the bill. And I also wanted to thank all of the excellent panelists that just testified, not only for being here today on the bill at issue, but, for all the important work. Pete Wilson and Kirsten Britt, who are doing so much around gun violence and making a better path for our youth and quality of life in our neighborhoods, and Reverend Jones, who's doing a host on criminal justice reform and so much more. So thank you so much for being here on this issue and for everything that you do every day.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And thank you, Member Gim. I did not know that statistic about Asian addiction to gambling. That was insightful to me to know that. And I think putting it on the record was very important. Are there any others to testify on this bill? Seeing none, this concludes our public hearing. We will take a brief pause to go into our public meeting. Thank you. Okay. Are we okay to go, Sam?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. We will now begin our public meeting of the Committee on Public Safety to look at bill number 210, what is that?
923.
923, thank you for your assistance. With that, can you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Yes. Council Member Green. Okay, Council Member Gautier.
Present.
Council Member Gim.
Present.
Council Member Brooks. Vice Chairman Johnson. Okay, well, we will need at least one of these members to unmute and announce themselves. They're all still logged in. Councilmember Green. Councilmember Brooks.
Apologize.
There we go. and Chairman Jones.
Present. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to recognize on the script.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes.
Before we get into the public meeting, I just had a question. And you provide some information in the beginning, and I definitely thank you for bringing this legislation. It reminds me of when we had the Take Out Beer legislation some years ago that was sponsored by Senator Williams. And I just want to make sure that I understand that we at a local level are not preempted in any way in addressing this issue. Okay.
No, we are not, because
traditionally
we've been promised legislation from the state level 5 years ago, which never came. We have found out that the state police attempted to remove these machines from unregulated places other than truck stops and were sued. And what the discussion revolved around was there is no legislation at the state level or any of the local levels governing this, which opens the opportunity for us to create that those regulations. The industry outside of truck stops is not regulated by
So-
anyone.
So gaming is regulated at the state level, but
Correct. These are skills games. These are, in their minds, these
Got it.
are skills games,
There we
which
go.
is counterintuitive. But, you know, whenever I put up some money and expect to win some money, that's a game of chance. But
I understand now.
by
It's 'cause it's not
definition, they
considered
found a
gaming.
loophole.
Because it's not considered gaming, that's why we're not preempted, because they're called skilled.
Skills games.
Gotcha.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that
Gotcha. Okay.
important question. Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, I'd like to recognize Member Goodyear for a motion.
I do not have the script. I do not believe that I have the script. I thought since
Give me 1 second.
Vice Chair Johnson was here that you did not need me, so I didn't ask for it.
Okay. We're going to take a brief pause while you get the script sent to you, and then we will resume shortly.
Okay.
All right, I just sent it over, but it might take a second.
Councilmember Green, regarding one of the questions, with off-track sports betting, one of the arguments is whether the casino legislation allows for, this is unrelated to the current bill, to be clear, which was very site-specific for casino licensing, would allow a casino to contract with an entity not on its site to allow for sports betting. And I think that's one of the areas where an ongoing question of whether, the state is not actually sticking to its rules and regulations. So I think that there's a long conversation that we believe the state needs to do a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you receive the script yet?
I'm ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will resume. The chair recognizes again Member Goodyear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 210923 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. It has been moved and properly seconded that bill number 210923 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further that the rules of council be suspended in order to have first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it. And this concludes our business, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. This is probably one of the shortest hearings I've ever had. I tend to like the longer ones, but for purposes of your cooperation, we're going to end it quickly. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.